When I stood in my parents' kitchen, hands shaking as I held a $50,000 check, I had no idea this would be the last time I'd walk into that house as their daughter. As the late afternoon sun poured through the window, I stared at those numbers written in blue ink. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just money. This was 33 years of my life turned into a living ATM for Dylan's screw-ups. When I looked up, my mom, Patricia, stood by the dining table with that expectant look and said, "Emma, you're his sister. You got Dylan that job. Now you have to fix this." My heart skipped a beat. Then my dad, Robert, nodded and added, "50,000 isn't that much for you. You've got a good job, savings. Family's supposed to help each other." That's when a slow burn of anger rose inside me. Meanwhile, Dylan, my 31-year-old little brother, was lounging on the couch like skimming money from a kid's cancer charity was just a minor accident. When he saw me hesitate, he leaned back and said, "Emma, you've always helped me before. Why stop now?" My body froze. I couldn't believe it. After 33 years, they still expected me to clean up his mess. I glanced around the room, the family photos on the walls, all rewritten memories with Dylan at the center. On the shelf by the window, I noticed my college graduation photo shoved into a dark corner, while Dylan's high school diploma picture after repeating grades twice took center stage. Seeing that made one thing crystal clear. I was never the achievement, just the means to one. As I stood there, my mom stepped closer, her voice soft but heavy with pressure. "You know family's the most important thing. We can't let Dylan go to prison. Think about it, if you don't help, who will?" Her words pierced deep. I thought back to yesterday when I got the call from Detective Rodriguez. "We need to talk to you about recommending Dylan Martinez for the Children's Hope Foundation," he told me. Hearing that, my head spun while my body locked up. Dylan hadn't just stolen money. He did it at the very place I helped him get a fresh start. And with that, I knew my reputation, everything I'd built, was about to shatter overnight. Now, standing in that kitchen, I felt like I was at a crossroads. For 33 years, I'd followed the path they laid out. The responsible sister, the self-sacrificing daughter, the woman who carried everyone else's weight in silence. I looked down at the check and saw what it really meant. This wasn't $50,000. This was the college tuition I gave up to babysit Dylan. This was the promotion in Seattle I turned down because the family needed me. This was the relationship with Marcus I lost because I couldn't cut the toxic ties. While they waited for my answer, something shifted inside me. Yesterday in Dr. Martinez's office, my therapist of 2 years, she'd looked at me through her glasses and said, "Emma, you don't have to stay in this cycle. You have the right to say no." Her words echoed now, my heart pounding, my mind oddly clear. For the first time, I saw it. I had a choice. I always did. I'd just been trained to believe obedience was my only option. To everyone's shock, I slowly tore the check in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor as my dad gasped, "Emma, what are you doing?" Relief surged through me. "I'm done," I said, calmer than I thought I could be. Looking at their stunned faces, I went on. "For 33 years, I've paid for Dylan's mistakes. I gave up my career, my love, my happiness to clean up his chaos. Today's the day I say no." My mom stumbled back, disbelief in her eyes. "You can't abandon your family." "I'm not abandoning family," I answered firmly. "I'm abandoning dysfunction." I turned toward the door, where my suitcase packed early that morning waited. Dylan jumped up, panic on his face. "You can't do this. We're family." "That's right," I said, grabbing my suitcase. "And a real family doesn't turn one person into a slave for everyone else's mistakes." As I walked out, I heard my mom's sobs and my dad shouting my name. But for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. When I climbed into my car, I knew I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving behind a version of myself I'd never return to. Through the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of that home. And, in that moment, I saw a future where I didn't dread every phone call, where I could love someone without the fear of them running from endless family drama. But for you to really understand why I could rip up that check and walk out without looking back, you need to know how it all began, how an innocent 8-year-old girl turned into a living ATM for someone else's mistakes, and how long it took me to realize that real love never asks you to destroy yourself. To understand my story, you need to know about the Martinez family, a family that, from the outside, looked perfect. From the time I was little, My dad, Robert, was a strict aerospace engineer who believed discipline and responsibility were the keys to success. Every morning before work, he'd pat my head and say, "Emma, you're the oldest. You have to set an example for your brother." Hearing that, I always felt a heavy weight pressing down on my small shoulders. My mom, Patricia, was an elementary school teacher with a kind heart but a tendency to avoid conflict. Whenever something went wrong in the house, she'd pull me close and whisper, "Emma, you understand things better than Dylan. Can you help me keep the family at peace?" Right then, even at 8 years old, I felt the burden of being the peacemaker. Dylan, my brother 2 years younger, had been charming since day one. When he messed up and got questioned, he'd lower his head with innocent eyes and say, "I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry." And just like that, my parents' hearts would melt. But for me, it was different. The first clear pattern I remember was when I was 8 and Dylan was 6. One fall afternoon, we were playing in the backyard when Dylan threw a baseball too hard and shattered Mrs. Henderson's garden gnome. She was our notoriously cranky neighbor. The moment the gnome broke, Dylan ran inside and told Mom, "Emma told me to throw it that hard." Mom didn't ask a single question. She turned to me, her face full of disappointment. "Emma, why would you teach your brother to do something like that?" I froze, trying to process what just happened. "But Mom, I didn't tell Dylan anything," I stammered. "I was reading on the bench." Dylan started crying and clung to her legs. Mom just shook her head and said, "You're the older sister. You should have been more responsible. Now take your savings and buy Mrs. Henderson a new gnome and apologize." That was the day I learned a scary truth. Convenience mattered more than truth. That afternoon, I spent all my savings, $20 I'd saved for months, on a new gnome. Standing at Mrs. Henderson's door, my heart racing, I bowed my head and said, "I'm sorry for breaking your gnome. Here's a new one." Shame burned through me. Mrs. Henderson peered at me over her thick glasses. "Emma, are you sure it was you?" All I could do was nod, because I'd been taught to protect the family. But in her eyes, I thought I saw something, maybe understanding, that made me feel a little less alone. The pattern kept repeating. When Dylan cheated on a math test in 3rd grade, his teacher called home. Instead of asking him what happened, my parents turned to me, disappointed. At dinner that night, Dad set his fork down and said, "Emma, do you help Dylan with his math homework? You need to set a better example." My throat tightened. "I do help him every night," I whispered. I didn't know he cheated. While I tried to explain, Dylan gave that same innocent look and added, "I don't know why I did it. I know it was wrong." Mom hugged him and said, "Be more careful next time, sweetie." Then she turned to me. "From now on, you sit next to Dylan during homework and make sure he doesn't make mistakes." That's when I understood. Dylan was loved for who he was. I only had value if I could fix what he broke. The clearest example of this injustice came when I was 10. I spent an entire summer painting a sunset over the ocean for the county art contest. After chores and helping Dylan with homework, I'd sit quietly in the corner and pour myself into that painting. On award day, when they announced I'd won 1st place, my heart nearly burst. I turned to look for my parents, hoping to see them clapping with pride. Their seats were empty. The blow was physical. When I got home with my gold trophy and certificate, I found them in the principal's office because Dylan had gotten suspended for fighting. When I showed them my trophy, Mom barely glanced at it. "That's nice, honey. I'll look at it later. Right now I have to deal with Dylan." My joy sank into silence. I put the trophy on my shelf, but it felt like a cold decoration, not a symbol of achievement. That day I understood that no matter how much I accomplished, Dylan's troubles would always overshadow me. Christmas mornings told the same story. I'd spend weeks making handmade gifts, knitting Mom a scarf, building Dad a wooden picture frame, sketching a comic book for Dylan. Dylan, on the other hand, usually forgot until the last minute and grabbed something from the convenience store, or worse, something borrowed from friends. But when the gifts were opened, the reactions never changed. Mom would glance at my scarf and say, "Thanks, Emma." Then Dylan would hand her a slightly stale box of chocolates and she'd tear up, hugging him tight. "My sweet boy, you're so thoughtful. I love you so much." Each time, another piece of me went numb. Thankfully, I had Mrs. Chen, our neighbor. She was a tiny Chinese woman with sharp, watchful eyes. When she saw me sitting alone in the backyard, she'd bring me hot chocolate and sit beside me. One cold winter afternoon, after I'd been punished for another one of Dylan's mistakes, she put her hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Emma, some parents love in ways that don't make sense, but that doesn't mean you're worth less." Her words warmed me. For the first time in months, I felt seen. "But why do they always believe Dylan over me?" I asked, voice trembling. She paused, then said softly, "Sometimes adults are afraid of what they don't understand. Dylan needs more attention, so they think that's love. But real love is seeing your strengths and helping you grow them." For a brief moment, I understood it wasn't me. Still, that flicker of clarity couldn't change what waited at home. The pattern continued. I stopped expecting praise, stopped believing my needs mattered. I accepted that my value came from cleaning up Dylan's messes, not from being myself. By 12, the script was so ingrained I didn't question it. I became an expert at anticipating Dylan's needs, predicting his trouble, stepping in to minimize the damage for the family. I didn't realize I was being trained to be a human safety net for someone who'd never learned responsibility. And I couldn't possibly imagine how this would escalate for the next 20 years, leading me to that kitchen, ripping up that check. Even then, it was like a whisper deep inside telling me what I was learning about love and family would haunt me until the day I was strong enough to finally say no. When I hit my teens, I thought high school would be my chance to build my own identity. Instead, it became the years when our family pattern got amplified to the extreme. Dylan, now 13, had morphed from a mischievous kid into a teenager who could cause real problems. One fall morning when I was 15, I was getting ready for school when the house phone rang. As soon as my mom picked up, I heard the vice principal's tense voice. "Mrs. Martinez, we need you at school right away." Dylan was caught smoking in the bathroom and had alcohol in his backpack. My heart skipped a beat. Instead of focusing on how serious Dylan's rule-breaking was, my parents turned on me with blaming eyes. The second Mom hung up, she looked at me, disappointed. "Emma, did you know he was doing this? You're his sister. You need to pay more attention." I went rigid. "Mom, I didn't know anything," I stammered. "Dylan and I go to different schools, different schedules. How am I supposed to know what he does at school?" While I tried to defend myself, my dad pulled on his jacket, grabbed the car keys, and said in a hard voice, "From now on, you'll take Dylan to and from school every day. You make sure he doesn't leave campus until the final bell." That's when I realized Dylan's mistakes had officially become my responsibility. It meant dropping all my after-school activities. Debate club that I loved, the track and field team I'd trained so hard for, even study groups with friends. Instead, every day I had to walk 2 miles to Dylan's school, wait for him to get out, then walk him home. Dylan, of course, didn't appreciate any of it. On those afternoon walks, he'd complain, "Emma, you don't need to babysit me like this. I'm old enough." A slow burn lit up inside me. "Dylan, do you have any idea how much I gave up to do this?" I shot back, frustrated. I left the track team, quit debate, canceled everything with my friends. He just shrugged. "No one made you do it. That's the family's choice." Right then, I felt the harsh truth. He wasn't just ungrateful. He saw my sacrifice as a given. Things got worse when Dylan started skipping school a lot. Every time the school called about his absences, my parents didn't ask where he'd gone. They asked me why I didn't know where he was. One especially rough night, after the 5th call that week from Dylan's school, Mom turned to me and accused, "Emma, are you actually taking him to school? Or do you drop him at the gate and leave?" My throat tightened. "Mom, I walk him to his classroom every morning," I whispered. "But I can't sit in class with him all day. I have to go to my own school." Logic didn't matter. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Then find another way. You make sure he stays at school." That's when I knew they expected the impossible. I started skipping my own classes to go check if Dylan was still on campus. My grades tanked. From a straight-A student with a 4 gigapascals, I slid into C's and even D's in some classes. When Mr. Morrison, my homeroom teacher, asked me to stay after class to talk about the drop, he peered over his glasses, worried. "Emma, you used to be one of my best students. What's going on?" His concern twisted something in me. How was I supposed to explain that I was living 2 lives? One as Emma the student, and one as Emma the unpaid babysitter for a teenager who didn't want to be watched. How could I tell Mr. Morrison my family had decided managing Dylan mattered more than my education? "I'm dealing with some family stuff," I said vaguely. "I'll try to get better." While I struggled under the pressure, my best friend, Sarah started to see something was off. She was sharp, with great intuition and a careful eye. Every time I canceled plans for Dylan, she noticed. One lunch in the cafeteria, she put down her sandwich, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Emma, what's going on with your family? You're totally different." My heart pounded. I'd kept the family dynamic secret for too long, but the pressure was too much. I told Sarah about constantly monitoring Dylan, about how my parents blamed me for every one of his mistakes, about how I was sacrificing my education to act like a glorified security guard. When I finished, Sarah sat quietly, then shook her head, stunned. "Emma, this isn't normal. Families don't work like that. Dylan's a teenager. He has to be responsible for what he does." Relief washed over me, just a little. Someone had finally validated my experience. "But my parents say it's my responsibility," I whispered. "They say I have to protect the family." Sarah's eyes softened. "Emma, protecting your family doesn't mean destroying yourself. You're sacrificing your future for Dylan's present." Right then, for the first time, I started to question whether what I was doing was actually right. That question got drowned out by the next crisis. One weekend night, Dylan snuck out with Dad's car and crashed into the neighbor's fence. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the property damage was serious. When the police showed up to investigate, they found he'd been drinking and didn't have a license. As soon as my parents got the call from the station, their first reaction wasn't shock that Dylan had been drinking and driving. It was panic about the consequences. On the way to the station, Mom turned on me, accusing, "Emma, where were you tonight? Did you know Dylan went out?" I shook, feeling completely helpless. "Mom, I was doing homework in my room," I said. "I didn't know he took the car keys." Logic didn't matter. In their eyes, somehow Dylan nearly killing someone with a car was still my fault because I hadn't prevented it. The aftermath was devastating for me. I took even more blame and criticism, plus the social embarrassment when the story spread around the community. Worse, my parents decided I needed to supervise Dylan better, which meant no going out on weekends or joining any social activities. I missed the prom planning committee, missed spring break with my friends, missed most of the experiences that define high school. Instead, I spent weekends at home watching Dylan play video games, making sure he didn't sneak out again. Dylan, meanwhile, didn't learn a thing. After a week of symbolic grounding, he slipped right back into old habits, lying, skipping school, pushing boundaries. Only now he had the added confidence of knowing that no matter what he did, Emma would somehow get blamed and deal with the fallout. One especially difficult night, I was in my room doing homework while Dylan was allowed to watch television downstairs. I realized I was living in a prison of responsibility I never chose. I was giving up the most important years of my adolescence to serve as a buffer between Dylan and the consequences of his actions. In that moment, I knew my path wouldn't look anything like what I'd once dreamed. I used to dream about college, about getting away and starting fresh somewhere no one knew my family baggage. But even that dream was slipping as my grades kept falling and extracurriculars essential for college applications became impossible. Right then, it felt like a voice deep inside whispered that my teenage years were being stolen, and I didn't know how to get them back. All I could do was hope college would finally bring the freedom I desperately craved. But as I'd soon discover, escape doesn't come easy when you've been trained to believe your worth is tied to your ability to fix other people's problems. When I turned 18 and was finally ready to leave for college, I thought I'd found my escape from the toxic dynamic that had defined my childhood. After 2 years at community college, a compromise my parents forced so I could keep an eye on Dylan, I transferred to State University, 3 hours away. From the first day I walked into my dorm, it felt like breathing free air for the first time. My roommate Jessica, a bubbly girl from California, greeted me with a smile. "Emma, finally. I've heard so much about you from your emails." My heart practically danced. For the first time, I could just be Emma, not Dylan's sister, not the cleaner of messes, not the one carrying everyone else's mistakes. Just Emma, a freshman with her own dreams. Those first months, I thrived. In my marketing classes, Professor Anderson praised my assignments in front of the class. "This is creative, strategic, modern thinking." Emma nailed it. Hearing that, pride swelled inside me in a way I'd never felt before. I joined the Marketing Student Association, volunteered on campaigns for local businesses, and even landed an internship at a small ad firm. My grades were stellar. I made Dean's List both semesters. For the first time, I discovered Emma outside of family dysfunction. Then came Marcus, a pre-med junior with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. He wasn't like any guy I'd known in high school. He was ambitious, kind, and most importantly, he saw potential in me. On our first date at a cafe near campus, I shared my dream of starting a marketing agency focused on sustainable businesses. Marcus leaned in, genuinely interested. Emma, you've got vision. I can see you doing something big. His words made me feel like I was soaring. Those months with Marcus were the happiest of my life so far. We studied in the library, hiked trails, dreamed about the future. He once told me, Emma, you've got this rare strength. You care about people but still hold your boundaries. That's a gift. For the first time, I thought I'd found balance between caring and protecting myself. But freedom was just an illusion. 2 months into spring semester, at 2 a.m, my dorm phone rang. Half asleep, I answered. On the other end was my mother, sobbing. Emma, you have to come home. Dylan's been arrested. A chill ran through me. For what? I asked, though deep down I already knew it wouldn't be good. Between sobs, she said, Do why? He was drunk. Hit a parked car. Thank God no one was hurt, but they said he could go to jail. My head spun, my body frozen. What do you need me for? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. You know Dylan listens to you more. You have to come talk sense into him. Help us get through this, she begged. Right there, I realized the harsh truth. Distance couldn't break the invisible chains binding me to our dysfunction. Jessica had woken from the noise. When I hung up, she sat up, worried. Emma, are you okay? What's going on? I explained. And her reaction was instant. Emma, it's the middle of the semester. You've got midterms, an internship interview, deadlines. You can't just drop everything. She was right, logically. But guilt had been drilled into me too deep. That voice from childhood whispered, Good sisters put family first. You're selfish if you put yourself before Dylan. The next day, instead of going to class, I drove 3 hours home. When I walked into the familiar kitchen, Dylan sat at the table with our parents, looking half remorseful, half bored. As soon as he saw me, he stood and smiled. Emma, I knew you'd come. I knew you'd fix this. Anger burned in me. Dylan, do you realize how serious this is? I snapped. You could have killed someone. He shrugged. But I didn't. And the lawyer says it'll work out if the family supports me. In that moment, I saw it clearly. Dylan didn't just expect forgiveness. He expected rescue. My parents arranged for me to miss a week of school to support the family. That meant missing crucial midterm reviews, an internship interview I'd prepared months for, and a group project deadline my teammates counted on. When I called Marcus to explain, the silence on the line said everything. After a moment, he carefully asked, Emma, I get family emergencies, but this sounds like a pattern. Are you okay? My heart ached at his tone. Marcus, it's just temporary, I said, though I wasn't sure. I'll be back soon. Soon stretched into 2 weeks, then a month, as Dylan skipped probation counseling and my parents demanded I coordinate with lawyers and officers. Meanwhile, my college life collapsed. My grades dropped. My internship went to someone else. Marcus tried to be supportive, but strain showed. Our calls grew shorter, his voice more frustrated. After I missed our 3rd straight date because of another Dylan crisis, he finally said, Emma, I care about you, but it feels like I'm competing with your family's dysfunction. Every time. You choose them over us. It's not a choice, I pleaded. It's family. I don't have an option. He paused, then said softly, Emma, everyone has options. Not seeing them, that's part of the problem. When he broke up with me 2 weeks later, I was devastated but not surprised. He explained gently, I love you, Emma, but I can't love someone who hasn't learned to love herself enough to set boundaries. You treat yourself like collateral damage. My heart shattered. Junior year only got harder. Dylan dropped out of high school, and my parents expected me to spend summer motivating him instead of pursuing internships I needed. When I protested, Dad scolded me. Emma, school will always be there. Family won't. Your priorities are wrong. That's when I realized something terrifying. In their eyes, my success only mattered if it served Dylan. Senior year, I got accepted into several grad programs. I should have been thrilled, but dread crept in. And sure enough, When I shared the news, Mom looked wounded. Emma, you can't leave the family now. Dylan needs your guidance. You're educated, use it to help us, Dylan chimed in casually. You don't need another degree. You're already smart enough to help me figure life out. I felt like I was at a crossroads, but only one road got family approval. Graduation came with mixed emotions. Walking across the stage, I scanned the audience for my parents. They showed up late, left early because Dylan had an emergency. Later, I learned it was just a hangover. At dinner with the few friends I had left, I looked at the diploma in my hands. It felt less like a passport to freedom and more like a certificate of survival. I had an education, but I was still tethered to the same family patterns college was supposed to break. That night, it sank in. I hadn't escaped. I'd only delayed the inevitable return to being fixer, caretaker, and safety net for Dylan's chaos. And deep down, I knew the truth. Real freedom required more than physical distance. It required emotional courage I hadn't built yet. And the road ahead would test me in ways college never could. After college, I swore this time would be different. I'd focus on my career, build an independent life, and finally set boundaries my college years never taught me. At least, that's what I told myself when I accepted a marketing coordinator role at a promising tech startup called Innovate Tech. From day one, I felt a surge of excitement I hadn't known since my first semester in college. My boss, Rebecca Martinez, a tough but fair woman in her 40s, introduced me to the team and said, "Emma, your college portfolio is impressive. We expect big things from you." My chest nearly burst with pride and determination. The first few months were magical. I threw myself into work with a passion I didn't know I had. My very first campaign boosted website traffic by 40%. In a team meeting, Rebecca smiled and told everyone, "This is exactly the kind of creative thinking we need. Emma has exceeded expectations." I floated out of that room. Clients started requesting me specifically. Coworkers came to me for advice. For the first time in my adult life, success was mine alone, untouched by family drama or obligations. But peace never lasted long. In my 4th month, at the peak of my momentum, my phone buzzed on lunch break. The caller ID read, "Dylan." My stomach knotted instantly. "Emma," he started without preamble, "I need to talk to you about a business opportunity. I'm starting a landscaping company with some friends. I just need someone to co-sign a loan." Red flags shot up everywhere. "Dylan, do you even have experience in landscaping?" I asked, hoping logic would kill this idea. He laughed it off. "I don't need experience. I've got enthusiasm and work ethic. Plus, my market research says there's demand." I knew his research was probably just drunk bar conversations. But Dylan was relentless. My parents joined the pressure campaign, calling it "Supporting Dylan's Entrepreneurial Spirit." He even showed up at my apartment with a copy-and-paste business plan from the internet, spreading papers across my coffee table. "See? I've worked out all the details. Just 15 grand to start, and I'll pay it back in 6 months." I pointed to glaring holes. "Dylan, you haven't accounted for seasonal work, equipment maintenance, or insurance costs." He waved it off. "Minor details. I'll figure it out. What matters is getting started." And there it was, the pull between my rational adult brain and the guilt programming of my childhood. Against all better judgment, I caved. Dylan's persistence, my parents framing it as a family investment, and my fragile hope that maybe this time he'd grow up all pushed me over the edge. At the bank, the humiliation was sharp. The loan officer skimmed Dylan's empty credit history and work record, then looked straight at me. "Miss Martinez, you understand you're fully responsible if he defaults, correct?" I nodded, my body tight with anxiety. "I understand," I whispered, signing papers my gut screamed against. At first, Dylan seemed committed. He bought equipment, hired a couple friends, even booked some jobs. He made a few small payments. I let myself believe maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was finally growing up. By month 4, the updates slowed. By month 5, he stopped answering my calls. By month 6, the bank notified me the payments had stopped completely. When I finally tracked him down at a friend's apartment, the scene was gutting. The equipment sat unused in a dusty garage, flyers and business cards scattered like abandoned dreams. Dylan lay on the couch in the middle of the afternoon, hungover. "Emma," he said casually, barely looking up. "Yeah, that business thing didn't work out. Market wasn't as good as I thought. Rage erupted inside me. Dylan, you owe the bank $15,000. What's your plan to pay it back? He sat up with a shrug. I don't have money. I thought you knew the risk when I started. Businesses fail sometimes. That's when it hit me. Dylan never intended to take responsibility. Not for success, not for failure. The impact on me was immediate. The $350 monthly payments forced me to pick up a weekend waitressing job. Sleep deprivation and stress wrecked my performance at Innovate Tech. I missed deadlines, made careless mistakes, showed up late. Rebecca noticed quickly. In her office, she studied me with concern. Emma, your performance has dropped significantly. Is something going on in your personal life? Shame swallowed me whole. How could I admit I'd sabotaged myself co-signing for my reckless brother? I'm dealing with some family financial issues, I muttered, unable to meet her eyes. She spoke gently but firmly. Emma, talent isn't enough if personal chaos consumes it. You need to decide what's truly important for your future. She was right. But I felt trapped. The trap tightened when a huge opportunity came. Innovate Tech landed a major client, and they needed someone to relocate to Seattle as campaign manager. The role came with a big raise and major career growth. Rebecca personally recommended me. When I told my family, hoping for support, the reaction was the opposite. Mom panicked about the distance. Dad frowned and said, Emma, we raised you better. Family comes before money. You can't abandon your responsibilities for career advancement. That familiar knot twisted in my stomach, guilt, resentment, confusion. This is exactly the kind of opportunity I've worked for. I argued weakly. I can still visit. Mom's eyes welled up. Emma, Dylan's struggling. He needs your guidance. You can chase career later, but you only have one family. Dylan, spooning dessert like it wasn't about him, finally chimed in. Yeah, Emma. You don't need to move to prove you're successful. You're already successful enough. And in that moment, I realized my achievements only mattered to them if they served Dylan. Against every instinct, I turned down Seattle. Rebecca was disappointed but not surprised. Emma, she told me, you've got tremendous potential, but you're letting circumstances hold you back. Someday, you'll have to choose between family comfort and personal growth. I watched that chance slip away while working 2 jobs to cover Dylan's debt. My dating life flatlined. Weekends vanished. Health deteriorated under stress and exhaustion. 2 years later, when I made the final payment, I sat in my car outside the bank and cried. Not out of relief, but from realizing the cost. Career momentum, financial stability, health, and most of all, self-respect. That's when I finally saw the truth. The problem wasn't just Dylan's irresponsibility or my parents' manipulation. The real problem was the training I'd carried since childhood, the belief that my worth was tied to fixing other people's problems, even if it meant destroying my own future. But knowing the pattern and breaking it, those were 2 very different things. And I still didn't have the strength to truly change it. At 28, I'd spent a decade cleaning up Dylan's messes and wondering why I always felt like the loser in my own family. I'd accepted that this was just how life worked. Some people get unconditional love, and some have to earn it by fixing other people's problems. But the truth, when it finally surfaced, was more brutal than anything I could have imagined. One fall afternoon, I decided to stop by my parents' place to talk about Dylan being unemployed again and needing temporary support. I arrived early, hoping for a calm talk before Dylan showed up with his usual excuses. When I opened the door with the spare key, I heard my parents on the phone in the living room. As soon as I realized they were talking about me and Dylan, I froze and couldn't help listening. My mom's voice carried clearly. Patricia, you know Dylan needs more help than Emma. Emma's stronger. She'll figure it out. But Dylan's different. He needs someone to always be there. My heart skipped a beat. My dad followed, steady and sure. Exactly. We've talked about this many times. Emma can take care of herself. But Dylan won't survive without a backup plan. Emma is the backup plan. I shook like I'd been struck by lightning. I stood in the hallway feeling the floor tilt under me. This wasn't a random conversation. This was a plan they'd discussed and refined. Mom kept going, practical and cold. And she always does what we need. Emma's got a good heart, maybe too good. She'll never walk away from family. It felt like a punch to the gut. I slipped back out and went to the driveway needing air. I sat in my car, hands shaking on the wheel, trying to process what I'd heard. For 30 years, I believed my parents just loved Dylan more. I thought they were blind to his mistakes because of love. But now I understood. They weren't blind. They saw everything and chose to use me as Dylan's safety net. I realized I'd been living inside a carefully constructed lie. For days, I couldn't focus. At work, I sat at my desk replaying that call on a loop. Every time I heard backup plan in my head, a wave of nausea hit me. I started reviewing my whole life with new eyes. Every time they said, Emma is more mature, they meant, Emma will handle the consequences. Every time they said, Dylan needs her guidance, they meant, Dylan needs someone to clean up his mess. I decided to dig deeper. I searched the old boxes in my childhood room, the ones my parents kept with family memories. What I found stunned me. In a folder labeled Dylan's Future, I found documents going back to my high school years. Emails between my parents about strategies to motivate Emma to help Dylan. Notes from meetings with the school counselor about how to leverage the older daughter's sense of responsibility. One email from my mom to my dad when I was 16 made me sick. Robert, we should encourage Emma to apply to schools close to home. If she goes far, who will help Dylan navigate high school? She can attend college anytime, but Dylan needs support now. The world seemed to collapse around me. There was another folder with research on sibling dynamics and how to motivate the responsible child to support the struggling sibling. They'd even consulted a family therapist not to fix the dysfunction, but to learn how to manipulate me better. In the therapy notes, I read words that chilled my blood. Therapist suggests using guilt and family loyalty to ensure Emma continues providing support. Important to frame this as family love rather than obligation. So even their tactics had professional guidance. Those documents showed a pattern of calculated manipulation spanning decades. Every major decision in my life, from declining a scholarship to co-signing Dylan's loan, had been orchestrated through careful emotional pressure. When I finally confronted my parents with the evidence, their reaction confirmed my worst fears. Instead of shock or denial, they were defensive and dismissive. My mom glanced at the emails and said, annoyed, Emma, you're being dramatic. This is just how parents plan for their kids' futures. We want both of you to succeed. Anger rose in me. Succeed? I repeated, stunned. You sabotaged my education, my career, and my relationships to build a safety net for Dylan. My dad stepped in, patronizing. Emma, you're seeing this the wrong way. We taught you family values, loyalty. Those qualities will serve you well. That's when I knew they truly didn't see anything wrong with what they'd done. Desperate for honesty, I turned to Dylan, who'd arrived mid-argument. Dylan, did you know about all this? Did you know they planned to use me as your safety net since we were kids? He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable but not denying it. After a long pause, he shrugged. Emma, everyone in a family has different roles. Yours is to help. Mine is different. I stepped back, mind reeling. And you're okay with that? I asked, barely above a whisper. He looked uneasy but honest. I mean, I didn't ask to be born into this family. But since you were always willing to help, I figured that's just how it works. I felt like I was drowning in the scope of the betrayal. This wasn't about favoritism or unconscious bias. This was about parents who deliberately sacrificed one child's future to protect the other child's comfort. A family system designed to exploit my empathy and loyalty. The worst part was how they framed it as love. They convinced me that sacrificing for Dylan proved my character, my loyalty, my moral strength. They weaponized my virtues against me. That night, I sat in my apartment with stacks of papers spread across the coffee table, like evidence of a crime committed against my childhood. Each page represented a moment when my parents chose Dylan's immediate comfort over my future. For the first time in my life, I saw it clearly. I wasn't an unlucky victim of family dynamics. I was a deliberate casualty of a calculated strategy. My phone rang, snapping me out of it. Dylan's name lit up the screen, but I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a text. Emma, I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Maybe we can talk? Even his apology centered on his intent, not the impact on me. Right then, I knew something had shifted. 30 years of guilt programming wouldn't vanish overnight, but the truth had cracked the foundation of their control. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The life I knew was over. The only question left was whether I had the courage to build a new one. By 30, I finally had what looked like stability. I'd climbed to marketing director at a mid-size firm, lived in my own apartment, and for the first time in adulthood, had an emergency fund untouched by Dylan's chaos. But every step up for me seemed to highlight how far Dylan was falling. At 31, he'd burned through jobs, girlfriends, and apartments. Each failure triggered the same cycle: frantic phone calls, family meetings, and pressure on me to fix whatever he'd broken. One Monday morning, minutes before a huge client presentation I'd prepared for months, my phone lit up. Mom's panicked voice spilled through the line. "Emma, you have to come right away. Dylan got fired and his landlord's threatening eviction. We need a family meeting." My temples throbbed. "Mom, I have an important presentation today. Can we talk tonight?" Her answer came sharp with guilt. "Emma, this is a crisis. Family comes before career. You can reschedule your meeting." That familiar knot twisted inside me, rage tangled with helplessness. Against every instinct, I called my boss, invented a family emergency, and postponed. Her disappointment stung worse than the lie itself. At the meeting, it was the same sad script. Dylan slouched on the couch, parents flanking him like bodyguards, me expected to provide the solution. When I pressed him for details, he muttered excuses. His boss was a jerk. The rules were unfair. Finally, he admitted to showing up late, skipping shifts. But that's not a big deal. It was obvious he still had no concept of accountability. 2 draining hours later, after my suggestions were shot down or excused away, I caved. I agreed to cover his first month's rent and co-sign the lease. Every part of me knew it would backfire. And it did, again and again. As Dylan's problems escalated, gambling, debts, drinking, my own life shrank. Relationships fizzled before they could start. I was always on edge, always canceling, always cleaning up. Then I met David. He was an architect in his mid-30s. Calm, thoughtful, and unwilling to dance around the truth. By our 3rd date, after yet another cancellation thanks to Dylan, he looked me square in the eye and said, "Emma, I like you a lot, but I need to understand what I'm getting into. Is this kind of family drama normal for you?" Shame rushed through me. "I'm sorry, David. Dylan's just going through a rough patch." He nodded but pressed gently. "Emma, out of 3 dates, you've canceled 2 because of your brother. That doesn't sound temporary." He saw the pattern I'd stopped seeing. At first, I defended it: family loyalty, being there for the people you love. But David didn't let me hide behind excuses. "There's a difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Which do you think you're doing?" His question hit me like a cold wave. For the first time, I wondered if I'd been enabling dysfunction, not helping it. Our relationship became a turning point, not because he forced change, but because he gave me perspective and steady support. When he proposed after 18 months, I was overjoyed and terrified. Joy because I'd found someone who truly saw me. Terror because I knew how my family would react to me putting someone before Dylan. They didn't disappoint. When I announced the engagement, instead of congratulations, I got lectures. Mom frowned. "Emma, the timing isn't good. Dylan needs you more than ever. You can't abandon family when he's turning a corner. Dylan's been turning corners for 10 years. I shot back, surprising myself with the bite in my voice. "When's it ever my turn to live my own life?" Dad cut in, stern. "Emma, you're being selfish. Family is forever. Men come and go." It was the same manipulation I'd heard all my life, dressed up as wisdom. David stood by me through it all, calm, unwavering, never demanding I cut ties, just encouraging me to set boundaries. But wedding planning became another battlefield. Every detail: venue, guest list, timing was criticized, undermined, reframed around Dylan's needs. At one dinner, Dylan even tried to poison the well. "Emma, are you sure about David? He seems controlling, always trying to change you." I bristled. "He's not controlling. He's helping me have boundaries." Dad scoffed. "Boundaries with family? That's Western nonsense. Families don't have boundaries." Right then, I saw it. My family didn't just resist boundaries. They rejected the very concept. The breaking point came at our engagement party. Dylan, newly jobless again, showed up drunk, insulted David's friends, and demanded everyone's attention. When David gently suggested he slow down, Dylan snapped, "Who are you to tell me anything? You've only known Emma 2 years." The embarrassment and rage froze me. David, calm as ever, got Dylan home safely. But later, in the car, he finally spoke the words he'd been holding back. "Emma, I love you. But I can't marry into this dysfunction if you're not willing to address it. I won't spend our marriage accommodating your brother's chaos." It wasn't a threat. It was truth. And I knew it. If I wanted a future with David, if I wanted a future at all, I'd have to confront my family and set the boundaries I should have drawn decades ago. The days of trying to please everyone were over. The next decisions I made would either save my marriage before it began, or cost me both David and my family. By 33, I thought I'd seen the worst of Dylan's chaos. I dealt with the DUIs, firings, breakups, gambling, debt, and endless emergencies. I believed there had to be a limit to the damage one person could cause. I was wrong. That March morning was clear and bright, and for once I was enjoying a rare moment of peace. Then my phone rang. The caller ID was unfamiliar. "Miss Martinez, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Metropolitan Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding Dylan Martinez and your recommendation for his position at the Children's Hope Foundation." My heart plummeted. "I'm sorry, what happened?" I asked, though dread already tightened my chest. The detective's voice was steady. "We're investigating allegations of embezzlement. Dylan Martinez is accused of stealing approximately $50,000 from the foundation over the past 8 months. The world froze. $50,000 from a children's cancer charity. The very organization I'd vouched for, staking my professional reputation to get Dylan hired. "Detective, are you sure there's no mistake?" I whispered. "I'm afraid not, ma'am. We have bank records, transaction histories, and witness testimony. The case is strong." I felt like I was drowning. 6 months earlier, Dylan had come to me desperate, swearing he'd changed. "Emma, I know I've disappointed you, but this time's different. Please, just one more chance." Against David's warnings, against my own instincts, I'd reached out to Helen Crawford, the foundation's executive director, and someone I respected deeply. I had promised her Dylan could be trusted. I had no right to make that promise. Now, my name was splashed across headlines. "Nonprofit employee accused of stealing $50,000, sister recommended him." My inbox filled with speculation. Helen emailed me directly. "Emma, the board has decided to sever all marketing contracts with your firm pending the investigation. I hope you understand our position." Her professionalism only deepened the sting. In one blow, Dylan had destroyed one of my most meaningful relationships and cost my company a major client. At the office, colleagues looked at me with a mix of sympathy and suspicion. That evening, I sat blankly on the couch watching news coverage until David came home. Seeing my tears, he sat beside me, took my hands, and listened as I poured out everything. "Emma," he said at last, voice tight with sadness and anger, "I know you've always wanted to help your brother, but this is beyond anything we could have imagined." And I knew. He'd been endlessly patient, but Dylan had finally crossed a line. "David, I don't know how to fix this," I whispered. He squeezed my hands. "You don't fix it, and it's not your responsibility." But my parents didn't see it that way. Mom's call came that night, her voice frantic. "Emma, you have to help us. Dylan's facing prison. You have connections, you have savings. You have to do something." "Mom," I said firmly, "Dylan stole from children with cancer. This isn't a small mistake I can clean up." She cried harder. "You don't understand. If Dylan goes to prison, his life is over. You can pay the money back. You can talk to people. You have to save him." In her mind, the crime didn't matter, only the consequences Dylan faced. A lawyer laid it out bluntly. Felony embezzlement, vulnerable victims, high likelihood of maximum sentencing. At a family meeting, Dylan shrugged through it all. "Emma, maybe you could talk to Helen? Convince her to drop charges?" I stared at him like he was a stranger. "You betrayed Helen's trust. Why would she listen to me?" He shrugged again. "You're good with people. Worth a shot." My parents pushed restitution. "If the money is returned," Dad said, voice authoritative, "maybe the charges will lessen. Emma, you have savings. 50,000 isn't impossible for you. Family protects each other." My heart hammered. They weren't asking me to loan him money or sign a lease. They were expecting me to empty my savings and shoulder a crime I didn't commit. With all due respect, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. This isn't a financial mistake. This is a crime. Dylan made choices, and he has to face the consequences. The backlash was instant accusations of selfishness, betrayal, disloyalty. Dylan glared at me, bitter. Emma, you've always helped me. Why are you abandoning me now when I need you most? And in his eyes, I saw it. He genuinely believed he was entitled to my rescue. That night, David and I sat in the quiet, the weight of it all pressing down. Emma, he said gently but firmly, if you pay that money, you're not just enabling Dylan, you're covering up his crime. And I can't support that. It was the ultimatum I'd been running from my entire adult life. My decision about Dylan's restitution wouldn't just define my relationship with my family. It would decide the trajectory of my entire future. Either I'd keep rescuing and lose everything else, including David, or I'd finally say no and face whatever came with it. That night, after my family asked me to pay for Dylan's crime, I sat in the living room with David feeling like I was standing on the edge of a decision that could change my whole life. For 33 years, I believed I had no choice. Family is family. Blood is thicker than water. Good sisters sacrifice for troubled brothers. Sitting there with the man I love, looking at the future we could build, I finally saw the choice David had been gently pointing to. I could choose dysfunction, or I could choose health. As that clarity washed over me, something fundamental shifted inside me. It felt like a lock that had been sealed for decades finally clicked open. David, I said, calmer than I felt, I'm not paying for Dylan anymore. I'm done. He squeezed my hand. Emma, are you sure? Once you make this call, there's no going back. Your family won't forgive this easily. I nodded, steadier than ever. I know. And for the first time in my life, I'm okay with that. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Today, I'd stand up for myself and break the cycle that had run my adult life. I called my family and asked for a meeting. Something in my voice must have landed differently, because there was no argument about the time. They agreed to meet that afternoon at my parents' house. Driving through the old neighborhood, I felt a mix of nerves and relief. In my bag was the speech I'd practiced with David, the points I needed to make, the boundaries I needed to set. In the living room, the scene was familiar. Dylan on the couch in a defensive slump, my parents on either side like a wall. But this time, I didn't sit in my usual chair, the spot that put me in the position of a petitioner. I stayed standing and took up space for the first time in my memory. I'm here to explain my decision, I began, my voice stronger than I expected. I will not pay restitution for Dylan's crime. I'm not co-signing anything. I'm not lending money. I'm not using my connections to help him dodge consequences. Silence hit the room like a weight. Mom reacted first. She shot up, shocked and wounded. Emma, you can't be serious. You can't abandon your family like this. I took a breath and stuck to what I'd prepared. I'm not abandoning family. I'm abandoning dysfunction. There's a difference. Dad cut in, voice rising. You're being selfish. Family means sacrifice. Did you forget what we taught you about loyalty? A long-buried righteous anger rose in me. Loyalty? I repeated, stunned. You want to talk about loyalty? I've been loyal for 33 years. I sacrificed college opportunities, career advancement, relationships, and financial security to be loyal to this family. And what loyalty did I get back? Dylan finally chimed in with his usual tone. Emma, you're overreacting. We're family. Families help each other. That's how this works. I turned to him with a new clarity. Dylan, this isn't a family in the traditional sense. This is an enabler and an addict. I'm the enabler. You're the addict. You're addicted to dodging consequences and letting other people clean up your messes. He stiffened. I'm not addicted to anything, I'm just going through a hard time. He truly couldn't see the pattern, or he refused to. Dylan, you're 31, I said, surprisingly patient. You've been going through a hard time your entire adult life. You lose jobs for being late and underperforming. You rack up gambling debt. You blow up relationships through irresponsibility. Now you embezzled from a children's charity. At what point does a hard time become a pattern of choices? Mom started crying. Not sad tears. The manipulative kind I knew from childhood. Emma, she sobbed theatrically. You're breaking my heart. This isn't the daughter I raised. You've become cold and unfeeling. Instead of guilt, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Mom, I said gently but firm. You raised me to be a fixer, a helper, a safety net. You didn't raise me to be a person with my own needs and dreams. And honestly, I don't fully blame you. You probably learned this pattern from your own family. She paused, tears halting, thrown by the unexpected compassion. But understanding the pattern doesn't mean I have to keep it going, I continued. I have a choice, and I'm choosing differently. Dad, frustrated that the usual tactics weren't working, tried a new angle. Emma, practically speaking, Dylan needs help. If you don't help, he'll go to prison. Can you live with that, knowing you could have stopped it? I gave the answer I'd practiced with David. Dad, prison might be exactly what Dylan needs. For the first time in his life, he'll face real consequences without a rescue. Maybe that will finally push him to take responsibility. The room recoiled. Letting Dylan face consequences was a foreign concept here. Dylan finally showed a real emotion. Anger. Emma, you're heartless. You'd let me go to prison instead of helping? For a split second, the old programming tried to surface. Then I remembered what David said about enabling versus helping. Dylan, I'm not letting you go to prison. You chose prison when you chose to steal $50,000 from a charity. Actions have consequences. I didn't create them, and I won't shield you from them anymore. As the reality set in, the pleas turned to threats. Guilt trips became emotional blackmail. If you walk away from this family, Dad said flatly, don't expect to be welcomed back. The door will be closed. A flicker of sadness passed through me, but it was followed by deep relief. I understand, I said simply, and I accept that. I headed for the door, then turned back. I want you to know I love you. I always have. But love doesn't mean accepting abuse, manipulation, or being a scapegoat for someone else's choices. Love means wanting the best for each other, including accountability and growth. My hand touched the doorknob when Dylan made one last attempt. Emma, if you walk out like this, you'll regret it. You'll realize you made a mistake. I looked back with total clarity. Dylan, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The weight I'd carried my whole life lifted. For the first time, I walked away from a family crisis without taking responsibility for fixing it. Driving home, I called David to tell him what happened. When I finished, his response was immediate and steady. Emma, I'm proud of you. I know that wasn't easy. Tears finally came. Not sadness, not regret, relief. David, I feel like I can finally breathe, I said. I didn't realize how heavy it was until I put it down. That night, sitting with David in our living room, planning a wedding we could now move forward with, I felt a sense of possibility I'd never known. For the first time in my adult life, my future was mine. Leaving dysfunction doesn't mean abandoning love. It means loving yourself enough to refuse to be destroyed by someone else's choices. With that understanding, I was finally free to build the life I actually wanted, with someone who sees and values who I really am, not the version of Emma built to serve everyone else. 2 years after I slammed my parents' door for the last time, I sat in my office as a senior marketing director at a top consulting firm, staring out at the skyline of the city I now called home. At 35, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was actually living my life, not some version designed to serve everyone else's needs. Marriage to David became the foundation for that new identity. From the beginning, he patiently helped me learn how to make choices based on what I wanted, not what I thought others expected. One sunny Sunday morning as we made breakfast, David grinned and said, Emma, have you noticed this is the first time in months you haven't checked your phone? Worried about some family emergency? I froze for a second, then laughed softly. You're right. I didn't even realize. It feels strange not living in constant expectation of the next crisis. That's when it hit me. Peace isn't something you chase. It's what happens naturally when you stop participating in toxic drama. The family I chose, close friends, co-workers, even David's son from his first marriage became the support system I never knew I needed. Those relationships were built on respect, healthy boundaries, and unconditional care. Sarah, my best friend from high school who I'd reconnected with, often called to check in. During one especially meaningful conversation, she said, almost in awe, Emma, you're different. You seem lighter. Like some invisible weight's finally gone. I felt a wave of gratitude. Sarah, I didn't realize how long I'd been carrying it. Now that it's gone, I can finally see who I really am underneath all that guilt and responsibility. Work flourished too. No more missing key meetings or turning down opportunities because of Dylan's disasters. My focus was total, and the results showed. Our firm won major industry awards, and I was invited to speak at conferences on strategic marketing. When my CEO, Patricia Wong, called me in to discuss leading the company's West Coast expansion, she looked at me with genuine respect. "Emma, your work these past 2 years has been exceptional. We want you to take the lead on this." My heart soared not from needing her approval, but from being excited about the challenge itself. But the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. In therapy with Dr. Martinez, who'd seen me through the darkest years, I could finally speak honestly about progress. In one breakthrough session, she smiled knowingly and said, "Emma, do you notice how differently you talk about yourself now? You don't define who you are by fixing other people's problems anymore." I sat quietly, letting her words sink in. "Doctor, for the first time I actually like the person I'm becoming. I don't have to be useful to be worthy of love." Healing, I realized, isn't just about cutting off toxic relationships. It's about discovering who you are beneath all the conditioning. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt, waves of guilt about abandoning my family, struggles with people, pleasing patterns that ran deep. But with David's support, therapy, and the safety of my chosen family, those moments became manageable instead of crushing. Sometimes, distant relatives or old family friends recruited by my parents tried to reel me back in. One call came from Maria, a longtime family friend. "Emma," she said gently, "your parents miss you. They say Dylan's changed. He's going to AL meetings. Maybe it's time to heal the rift." The tug of old programming stirred, but my foundation held. "Maria, I appreciate your concern," I replied with calm respect. "But lasting change requires consistent action over time, not promises or temporary efforts. If Dylan's truly committed, he'll continue without my involvement." There was a pause before she sighed. "You've become very strong, Emma." "Yes," I said simply, "I have." The most surprising moment came a year and a half after I cut contact. A handwritten letter arrived from Dylan. Not the manipulative type my parents used to send, but something different. "Emma," he wrote, "I don't expect you to respond, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I finally understand the damage I caused. I'm in real recovery now, not the fake attempts before. You were right to walk away. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't." Reading those words, I felt a storm of emotions: sadness for the lost years, relief at his acknowledgement, and a cautious hope. I showed the letter to David and Dr. Martinez before deciding to respond. After careful thought, I wrote back, "Dylan, I appreciate your honesty. Real accountability is an important first step. I'm open to considering limited contact in the future if you demonstrate sustained change over time. But any relationship we rebuild will be very different, with clear boundaries and expectations." I didn't feel triumph sending it. I felt peace. Looking at my life now, I see a woman I never dared to imagine back when I was trapped in dysfunction. I have a career I love, a marriage built on mutual respect, and a sense of self that doesn't depend on rescuing anyone. Sometimes, in the evenings, David and I sit on the patio watching the sunset. He'll turn to me with that warm smile and say, "Emma, do you realize you didn't just save yourself when you walked away? You saved us, our future kids. Maybe even Dylan, by finally forcing him to face reality." Leaning into him, I let the truth of that sink in. "David, I spent years thinking love meant sacrificing yourself for others. Now I know real love, whether for yourself or someone else, sometimes means refusing to take part in destruction. And I realized the strongest thing I'd ever done wasn't enduring decades of manipulation. It was finally having the courage to say no. Now, when I look ahead, I see possibilities instead of obligations, dreams instead of duties, love instead of guilt. And if I ever talk to my own children about healthy relationships, I'll tell them this: you deserve love that builds you up, not love that tears you down. You don't have to earn your worth by fixing others. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling destruction, even when destruction wears the face of family. My life finally belongs to me, and that's the greatest gift I've ever given myself.